We are back, and today we have a very special guest. This is the first time we've had a Canadian in the studio.
Yep, that is 100% true.
Well, I'm honored to be here. Hey.
Glad we could work it in.
Or I should say
his name.
I should say hey.
Hey.
Yes,
If you think
rather
about
than
it.
hey.
Today we got Dr. John Fisher. We got some, I think, pretty interesting stuff to talk about. So we're on Tarkio Tech's campus. I guess the best way to probably start is, what's your role here with Tarkio Tech?
Let me see. Back in 2014, when they started things happening, it was 2019 when we actually had our first students. But 2014, they brought me on to help, and so I've been my title, I guess, is Vice President of Academics and Program Development. Which is a big title for somebody who's actually a volunteer. So,
Yep.
But I started back in 2014. It's been 10 years putting this thing together, and amazing the results that we're getting and the fun that we're having.
Oh yeah, always fun.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe a decade's gone by.
No, really. Well, and it's been 1991 or something when it closed as Tarkio College. And so it was 20 some odd years. Is that my math all right?
Yeah.
Before they got things together and got the property back. And
It is crazy what only 20 years did to these buildings.
yes, it is.
Well, and actually, 20 years, yes, but even, the YSI was here until 2004, so really...
Right, okay.
Yeah, 20 years
even
today.
And I would say that there was probably some degradation towards the end of that, but really 20 years, but then, whatever, it was basically 10, 12 years before, it's just, it is. It's impressive.
So you volunteer here, but you have another job?
Oh, I do. I'm a professor of emergency services at a university in Utah.
How does setting up a curriculum for that differ compared to a vocational training like this?
Well, a lot of what we do at the university there is vocational education.
Okay.
In terms of, I work with firefighters, police, EMS, and of course a lot of what they do is technical type of training, trades. But in addition, we offer a bachelor's degree, and I'm involved in that as well at the university in Utah.
Are you allowed to say which school you like better?
Well, I really like the people here at Tarkio College or Tarkio Tech. Some really down to earth. I think it's Midwest, Midwest people.
People are different.
They are different, and I think they're open in Utah, but the people are here are open, friendly, and the Midwest. They also speak with quite a bit different accent too.
Yeah.
Well, not probably. I don't know. We talk about cricks in Utah and roofs and other kinds of
Cricks
things.
and roofs.
Yeah, but it's Missouri and Missouri, and so.
My mom always says Missouri.
Yeah, and I notice Lane Seymour, one of the people we work with here, he says Missouri all the time too. He must be an old Missouri. And
I remember there was a Simpsons episode whenever I was young where they were basically redoing Huck Finn, and they were floating on the raft down the river, and they're floating through Missouri, and it doesn't give you an exact line, but they hit a sign that says now entering Missouri, and then it says now leaving Missouri, now entering Missouri.
There we go.
Which I always thought was pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
I did have a quick question. How did you end up in How did you end up getting involved in the college in Tarkio in the first place, if you don't mind my asking that?
Well, I was at Northwest Missouri State University
Okay.
for about 10 years, 8 years actually, and developed some friends here in Tarkio. And way back then in the early 2000s, I came by and looked at the buildings and said, "Oh, what a tragedy this is! That this is all going to pot. It's decaying so quickly." And so I think that was part of my strong feelings about. And when I was invited then by one of the people that was involved, Sheridan Myers, to get involved in 2014, I jumped on it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It is always a little, I don't want to say weird to me, but the people that join us from the outside, and join us, I mean the Tarkio Tech,
Yeah.
because for a lot of people, like, this area is like so home. So it's weird when other people come in and treat it like home or really care about something for our community.
Well, and Ethan, is he do you call them homie too? I mean, is he?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Tarkio. I graduated from Tarkio High School. My father was from Burlington and my mom was from Pickering.
All right, so that your really roots are not here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're from big cities elsewhere, like Pickering and
Yes.
and Burlington Junction.
Exactly. So, and my parents, my dad was Navy nuke. He was in the Navy on a submarine in the nuclear program, and whenever he got out of the Navy, he took a job at Brownville. So it made sense for them to live here.
Right, sure. That's great. Okay, and so thus you came along.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I guess before we started, you were talking about you had a story and you've been doing some research with a couple of students. Or
Yes. There's a little bit of background information. I don't know whether your listeners want to hear this.
We want it.
All right, so
we're gonna get it.
not that I'm an anti-vaxxer, but can we pause just for a moment?
Sure, yeah, of course.
Okay.
All right, go ahead.
Okay.
A little background story.
All right. So I decided, for whatever reasons, partly because I, listened to podcasts, right, that I wasn't going to be vaccinated for COVID. And so I had planned on taking 2 students to the Balkans in 2022. And the day before I left, they said at the university that the other university I'm affiliated with, they said, so have you been vaccinated? And I said, no, I'm immunized, but haven't been vaccinated. They said, you can't go on this trip with these students. And so these 2 students, both women, ended up in Southeast Asia, Southeast Europe, by themselves. Although I had prearranged to have some friends that I had developed over the years in those countries to welcome them and to host them and mentor them, and they found people for them to interview. The whole idea of the research, and one of the students was set on the idea, I'm going to study evacuation and 72-hour kits. And I thought, well, evacuation, good topic, 72-hour kits. I don't know how that fits, but I guess it's a preparedness measure. But we'll go with your idea. They got over there, and their 24 interviews were arranged for them. Many of them were women. And the women started telling some very interesting stories about their experience during the Kosovo War, where they were either displaced or either forced to evacuate, and they evacuated, for example, to North Macedonia and to Albania. So these stories came up, and they they didn't realize at the time that the real jewel of their research were these stories, and about these women's experience. And so I don't know if I can find one here. Let me try.
And we were, so
Yeah.
we had kind of briefly talked about this at the beginning, and we talked about years, and I just looked it up. 98 to 99 was when that was.
Yes. And so now these women are middle-aged.
What were you saying?
So,
Well, just that the war was from, well, I can give you the exact dates if you're interested, but 98, 99, February 28th of 98 and June 11th of 1999.
yes. And so it was just over a year.
Yep.
But it was pretty traumatic for much of the population.
Yes.
There was Kosovo, interestingly, was a part of Yugoslavia, and Serbia was the dominant player in Yugoslavia. And they were administrators primarily, and they were the government in the province of Kosovo. And so, but this, they're by and large Slavic people. Serbians are Orthodox religion, and the Albanians, who are the majority population in Kosovo, are Albanian, and many of them are Muslim. And so, two cultures clashing, right? Yeah. So, quite a clash of cultures, and the Kosovar people wanted their independence, but the Serbians, of course, and it had natural resources and other things, didn't want to give them the independence. So that's partly where the war precipitated, and but over probably about 1 million people were either displaced from their homes, or and I think there were 600,000 or something that went to Albania as refugees. Here's the story of one of the women, if I can read it well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if I can, real quick before you do that.
Yeah.
So I would have been 8, 9 years old whenever this took place. I remember it happening, and I remember what you're talking about with refugees getting out of, they were leaving Kosovo, correct? My question, did we take some, or did we just displace them all in other parts of Europe?
No, there was conflict in Bosnia, Herzegovina earlier, and so we took many refugees from there.
Okay.
We took some from Kosovo. Other countries did as well. And provided assistance. And so there is a large Albanian population here. I don't know what large is, maybe 1 million people or so here that live in the United States, that and most along, in New York, Chicago, bigger centers.
Yes.
I don't know about Tarkio, whether...
Not too many.
Not too many.
Not last I checked.
No.
Should probably recensus that, but I'm almost certain zero.
Okay.
So, but I do remember what I couldn't remember. You're obviously recalling way more than I did because I was so young. But what I couldn't remember exactly what our involvement was. But like Tim, even whenever I would have to ask. So Tim's on our podcast a lot.
Yeah.
And they were still sending people there when he was in the military, and he's a couple of years older than me. So he would have been over there in like 2006, 10, 11, somewhere in that region. And he was there for a few years, even, 10 years later, a little over 10 years later after the conflict was over.
Well, the Kosovar people love Americans. And they love Bill Clinton.
Yes.
Okay, who was the president at the time?
Yeah.
And Bill Clinton had gone through Rwanda, I think, and he'd gone to Somalia and those experiences, and the United States had not, or NATO had not stepped up and helped those people. And when they saw that the genocide was happening in Kosovo, I think that the Clinton administration said, we're not going to let it happen again. And so they called on resources from NATO. And of course, there's a large American presence. There's still a large American presence in Kosovo today. And Serbia still doesn't recognize it as a country.
Gotcha.
Even though,
That's right.
Right? Yeah. And a few other places like Greece and Spain. I guess if you have minority populations that want to be independent, they probably aren't going to recognize it.
Yeah. And so it's not real quick, and I don't want to go down the full rabbit hole, but it's largely similar to what's going on in the Middle East with the Palestinians and what's the other side? Why
Well, Syrian or what? Who are you thinking? Or the Palestinians and
Israel.
in Gaza? Yeah, in Israel,
Gaza,
right.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
It's a similar situation, right? There's a few different factors that led,
Right.
but very similar, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, we won't get...
Right, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but
Right,
it's a similar.
right,
It's
yeah,
a similar.
yeah,
I
yeah.
guess it's a similar conflict, so to speak.
And so, although I have opinions, I'm not...
Right,
They're just
yeah.
opinions.
Yeah.
So Nora's story,
Mm-hmm.
and this is not a real name.
Do you have a age range?
What?
Age,
age.
roughly how old at the time?
She would have been, I don't know, 18 years old.
18.
maybe. Okay.
I'm just curious because
Right.
I'm wondering about perspectives of age.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I've met this woman, and so I know a little bit of background story, but the American student researchers were surprised by these stories. And Nora stated she doesn't have evacuation kits ready for herself or her family, and was unaware of the need or details. Well, amazingly, maybe a third of the people in the United States might have a 72-hour kit or evacuation kit or whatever. No, practically nobody would have it in that country.
I don't have one. I
Yeah.
mean, you know what I mean? And I guess I don't even really know what goes into one, what
Yeah.
I should have.
Well, so
We can come back to it.
Yeah,
yeah,
yes,
but she
exactly,
didn't. She didn't. She was 18 years old when her family fled Kosovo. The intention was building all around her village as word spread of the horrific things Serbian soldiers were doing in other areas. Her family lived in fear that at any moment they would have to flee, so they slept in all their clothes and shoes. They also could not turn on lights or candles at night for fear that a soldier would shoot it out. As they would walk around the village, all of the women would cover heads and faces, trying not to get raped. Parents would muffle their children's cries because if a Serbian soldier heard a child cry, they would shoot them. Albanian children were not allowed to attend school, so school was held in secret, hidden rooms by volunteer teachers. If they were discovered, they would have been executed. Families all through the village were starving, and Nora's family of 8 were especially hungry. Every day the soldiers would tell the villagers that their graves are ready. Nora's father would crawl out on the ground from their home into their fields to tend the cows, and each day they would say goodbye, as if they might not see him again. If a Serbian soldier saw an Albanian tending to their animals or working in the fields, they would shoot them immediately. The day did come when the soldiers surrounded their village, which was one of the last villages to be fully invaded, and Nora's father or brother had fled so that they could not be found. The soldiers forced everyone out of their homes. The men were gathered in one area, and the women and children forced into a fenced chicken coop. As the soldiers were raising their guns to execute the women and children, a Serbian leader who grew up in the village, and this is the the real irony of the whole story, right, is here these are your neighbors who grew up in the story, up in the village, told them to halt and that they needed to wait one more day before they killed the villagers because more graves needed to be dug. His intervention saved their lives. Everyone was forced to return to their homes, but all around the village, secret plans were made to escape that night. After the guards assaulted and raped the village woman and drank themselves to sleep, Nora and her family and other villagers quietly snuck past the guards into the middle of the night and made their way up the surrounding mountains. The next morning when the guards woke, they searched all around trying to find the missing villagers. Nora and her family prayed and prayed that they would not be discovered. A group of soldiers came within just a few feet of where they were hiding and even looked right at them, but they were not seen. Nora and her family felt that a protective barrier was placed around them and knew their prayers were answered. Nora's father and brother found them in the mountains and could not believe that they were all still alive. As the days went on in the mountain hideout, the weather got worse and all around was fear and suffering, but they survived. Nora's sister faced checkpoints twice a day to bring small amounts of food to Nora and her family. Nora stated she felt like they were living without hope of a future and the end of their dreams. After 2 weeks, word spread that the Americans had attacked Serbia and the Serbs were retreating. They were able to return to their homes, but they faced severe poverty for many years. This was so frightening to Nora that she developed severe stomach problems that she still deals with today. And so that's one story, and there were 9 or 10 stories that they got out of these 24 interviews that they had.
Mm-hmm. I would love America too if I went through that and they made the Serbians retreat.
Yeah, well, and we're instrumental in helping develop this new nation as well. So,
yes,
yeah,
which is still ongoing, correct? I mean,
well, the tension is still ongoing.
Yeah.
Yes, and so I don't know what the real numbers were at the time of the war, but of course the Serbians then fled from the nation, and there's about 3% of the population now are Serbian, and Serbian is actually the second language, or is one of the official 2 languages in the country. It used to be when they were in Yugoslavia that everyone spoke Serbian. Now the young people just speak Albanian and English. Many of them speak English. And it's YouTube English, so it's pretty good English. It's not it's not British English; it's American English that they're speaking.
Yeah, progressive at this point. So that's something I guess I didn't realize. So it was basically civil war, right?
I guess you could describe
Pretty
it as that, or
more
a
independence.
a war of independence,
More of
a revolutionary war, right?
Yeah.
Like our own American Revolution, and maybe that's why we have a sense of obligation to some of these countries that are involved in these kinds of things. Although, it's a fine balance. All these separatist movements around the world. France has them. Spain has them.
Right.
Almost every Canada has them.
Yes. Yep.
Is Kosovo a part of NATO now?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Not yet.
Okay.
And whether it will be, I think that they're trying to become part of NATO.
Yeah.
One of the research projects I was involved in was writing the story of the Donbass, which is part of eastern Ukraine, where many ethnic Russians live, and they have a story, an interesting story in themselves, and we'll leave that. I'm revising that so that it includes now the Kosovo War. No, excuse me, the Ukraine War. Let's get our countries right.
Right.
Yeah. and
Wars,
so,
too.
Yeah, our wars, right,
Yeah.
right too.
With Nora's story, and this kind of goes back to like the Nuremberg trials that I'm going to ask you. Do you think people are inherently evil, or do you think it's more of the trickle down effect of you have to do this, this is your job?
Well, I guess we need to ask ourselves, if I were forced or put in a position where I was required to do these kinds of things, would I say no and let my and die instead? You know, would I have that fortitude? And I hope as Americans that I don't know that I just pray that we would never get to that kind of a situation.
Yeah.
But and we've been so blessed for these last 200 some years.
Yeah. Well, and I think Nora's story is important, just in the fact that we societally we have very many opinions on what should happen or why things should happen and all these types of things, full well living in a country where it's been, I mean, the closest, I guess, since our revolution, the closest real thing that we've had that would be similar is our Civil War in, the 1861 to 1865, which none of us really understand what that was like.
Yeah.
And, very few of us, if hardly any of us, even remember what it was like during World War II anymore. And I think these stories are important because I think some people get numb to the fact that the world outside of here still operates like that, and in many places, and in most recent, in most recent history. Because I mean, you're talking about 25 years ago. That's not that very long ago, and I think people get many people start thinking, well, we shouldn't be involved in these types of things, and I mean, I think there's reasons to get involved in things. I think there's reasons not to, but I think if you got everybody in a room and you talked about the type of genocide or like Nora's particular story here, I don't think anybody would ever say that we shouldn't help those people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I really don't. I mean, there might be some out there, but I don't think the majority would ever say that. But I think we get very desensitized because we're not we're not seeing it every day. We're not living it every day. So it's really easy to just sit there and say that's their problem, not our problem. And then I'll just kind of cap this up with at the end of the day, we would like to believe that we can go hide in our own individual silos on this planet, but the planet's not that big. What it affects one of us really affects all of us in some type of way. And I think that I really think that we forget that sometimes as a society. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Well, all of these situations are complex, and of course the situation in Ukraine is complex.
Yeah.
And that's why I bring up the Donbass, for example. There were in that area of Ukraine, these people were fighting for their independence, and they were ethnic Russian people, and we don't understand that side of that war there. We have so quickly chosen sides as a nation.
Yes.
And without reasoning through the whole situation.
Right.
And that's, again, it's a hot topic and lots of opinions.
Yes. And in my opinion, we don't truthfully have all the information either. You know what I mean? I really feel like that. I mean, we get bits and pieces of it. And usually I think most of the time the problem is information comes in arrears. You know what I mean? You're so far really behind what led up to what we're arguing about right this minute that, you know what I mean? It's easy to overlook things that led to this point.
Yeah.
We get very focused on now and not a longer period of what led into whatever conflict is taking place. Yeah. But
well, one of the things that in the emergency services or emergency management we say is we're disaster junkies.
yes,
And so if we didn't have natural disasters, or if we didn't have human-caused disasters,
right.
those of us in emergency management would have nothing to do, you know?
Yeah. So here's a theory I have. I don't have any real proof, but I think a lot about this. And working for several large corporations primarily in energy delivery, generation and delivery of energy. My experience is we always talk about wanting to be proactive, just with anything that you're doing. Proactivity. We want to focus on proactivity. But I've noticed we're almost always reactionary.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think that the more I think about it, and I don't know, I'm just 34 years old. I'm not, I haven't experienced near enough yet. I'm still relatively young. But what I believe is I think people need adversity. I don't believe that the idea of a utopus nirvana could ever exist because no matter what, somebody's going to be upset about the nirvana because you know what I mean?
I pray daily for the coming of Christ.
Right. Yeah.
The second coming. But
I think even if that were to happen, don't you think we know there'd be people that'd be upset for some reason?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
And even when he comes, not everyone will go join his side. Right. I think that's the. I think that's the case.
Right, and I think we're so wired that we need adversity because I think overall adversity produces measurable results. So
it makes us strong, though, too.
Correct. Yes.
I mean, when we have adversity in our own lives.
Yes. Yeah. And adversity is on a very large scale, depending on who you are. It could be anything as small as. Am I going to be able to get in my car and purchase something from Casey's today for some person? And for one person, it might be I want to try to work on balancing the budget, for the entire country. Well, whatever your adversity is.
And I've been trying to balance my budget for 50 years of marriage now, so it doesn't work.
It's not easy, yeah.
I wish I could just print money.
Yeah, but I feel like people generally, I like to use this example, but you can do it with anything. But you could go around and do a bunch of stuff to try to prevent a fire, for instance.
Yeah.
But if you're doing that, you don't have any way to measure whether you were successful or not, other than you can say, well, there were no fires, but I don't know if it's because of what I did. When a fire starts, if you go out to fight that fire and you can say we responded, we had all the equipment, the plan went well, and the fire only destroyed 2 acres and no lives were lost. That is a set of measurable. That's like a set of measurable. What was the term I was just using? A set of measurable. Well, it's a set of measurable. I'm going to go to KPI, key performance indicators, but it's a set of measurable results that you can hang your hat on and say we accomplished this.
Right. Well, and that's true, but we can also look historically back and say. When we were using wood frame houses and not building the way we do today, there were a lot more fires. I've volunteered and been deployed with the American Red Cross. They, in their disaster action teams, they find that most houses, even in this community or other communities, are older houses that are burning.
Yeah.
The Colorado fires, for example, of what was it 2 years ago now? I'm not sure. Where the whole community was burned. Now that's a rarer type of situation, but on a day-to-day basis, I think we're doing better. although, as a little kid, I started my own prairie fire, and I think,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, not even just houses, but like I'm sure you remember in 2017 or 18, I can't remember. I had been traveling to Portland for my job at the time for a bunch of training,
yeah,
and a couple of kids had shot off fireworks in the gorge out there. And accidentally caught the whole thing on fire.
Yeah.
And they knew they had caught it on fire, but they were so afraid of the repercussions that they just didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And by the time anybody else figured out there was a fire, it had been 3 hours and they couldn't control
Right.
it. And everybody was so upset. So, I mean, to kind of talk to your point, like, and back to the point we were talking about, it's like most of these things almost always happen because of human error.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's true. Yeah. And
right. Just like you were talking about with old houses, we're not really good at improving infrastructure very quickly. Right. I mean, It does get done, but it's over a very long period of time. I mean, the first house that I purchased in Westboro was built in like 1890, 1891.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ton of things degraded in that house.
Yeah.
And I haven't lived there for 10 years. I did sell it, and there are still people that live in it. But like, if you were to really truthfully look at a lot of the infrastructure of that house that is wooden, it's probably dangerous.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would.
But because it still stands and somebody can still live in it, we have no real way of making it so that somebody could go back and truthfully rebuild that.
Right. Yeah, without starting again.
Right.
Yeah.
And to me, again, that goes back to when we were talking about being preventative versus reactive. Like, we're willing to let that sit there until it falls in and rebuild a house and find a way to make it. But we're not really willing to go around and say, okay, this thing is so old, somehow or another, we need to get something else in place of this structure,
Well, and so...
or just tearing abandoned stuff down sometimes, So.
Yeah.
The cost of doing anything like that, though,
It's prohibitive.
It's expensive, but the thing is that the lesson that we seem to can't learn is it's more expensive if you wait until you have to do something about it. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, but that kind of just goes back to, like, everybody thinks that something like this, like, oh, a fire's not going to happen to me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And like
until it does.
Yeah, but most of the time when you think about like worst case scenario that happens or that could happen to you, never really does.
Right. Yeah.
For most people.
Yep.
Well, and the same with the driving. I think statistics would suggest that all of us are going to be in at least one accident in our lifetimes. Knock on wood. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not a bumper, fender bumper.
Yeah.
But in my marriage, we've had 2 fires.
Mm-hmm.
One, we lost a garage.
Yep.
And a car in the garage.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, it was grease on the top of the stove,
Mm-hmm.
and so the smoke damage was the major thing,
Mm-hmm.
and and the cupboards, of course, were burned and charred above, but thank goodness for firefighters who got that out pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I think about the driving one all the time because
Yeah.
I drive a lot at night, and interstates, I don't worry about accidents that much, like driving at night,
Yeah.
because most people on interstate, they might just be tired, and you can tell if they're swerving. But these like county highways and
Yeah.
stuff, if I'm driving at like 2:30 in the morning, I always get a little bit nervous when I see headlights a couple hills up because
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, I know I'm not drunk driving. I know I'm wide awake. I've had
Yeah.
coffee. But this person could have been sitting at a bar
Yeah.
all night
Yeah.
and woke up at 5. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it would be super easy for them just to nail
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Or they
and-
could be
and-
traveling home from work that's 20 hours away and they're just close to, you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
just don't know the situation.
Well, in the Midwest, we face the perpetual deer accident, where we hit it here. So we lived in this area for 20 years, and and never did have an accident with a deer. But it, every time you take, 136 to between here and Maryville, for example, there in those hollows there'll be deer. Well, we were driving in Idaho, of all places, on the interstate and hit a deer and up across and utterly destroyed the car. And so, hey, it happens everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think more often here in the Midwest.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd say hitting a deer is more like an act of God as getting hit by a drunk driver.
I have a guy at work that deer have hit him. He's I think 3 different things, but the deer he never actually hit the deer. The deer ran into the side of him.
That happened with my first car.
Yeah, that happened to me one time too. It barely did anything to it. I got really lucky. But yeah. So what would you say? So since we're talking about, just general vehicle accidents as far as emergency preparedness goes, what's the best way to be emergency prepared driving in vehicles?
Well, I think we need to be prepared for all types of weather.
Yep.
And we should be carrying some things in our trunks or that we can pull out if for example we were stranded. And maybe that's the most dangerous type of a thing. We should have lights, warning lights or whatever that we can set on the road even if we could turn off to the side of the road. We need to be doing that kind of thing to make people aware of our presence.
Yeah, slow down a bit.
Yeah, slow down.
One thing I do notice, myself and my brother have both owned a few different European cars, and at one time they came in the trunk.
Okay.
Factory. So like the little triangles that you can put up. Yeah, like my Audi does have that came factory in it as part of a kit. Which I don't know, does any American vehicle?
No, I doubt it. I've never seen one. Yeah.
Right.
American vehicles don't break down.
Right.
You can still get in an accident.
Well, I'm still driving a 2002 Ford Ranger, so but I don't know. It was probably built in Canada or something.
Yeah, probably just assembled here. Either that or they just built things better in the 2000s than they do, or the early 2000s than they do now. Hang your hat on that. I think everybody said that throughout all of history.
You mentioned earlier a 72-hour kit.
Right.
Yes.
Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, that would be
Well,
great.
there are, if I can remember, there are probably a half a dozen areas that you want to prepare yourself or have things together that if you were, say your house were to start on fire, you could grab this at your door and take it out. And it would have important documents, or at least a photocopy of them. And of course, one of the ideas that, you take pictures of everything that's of value in your home and have an inventory, but important documents that in it you would carry a change of clothes possibly, but maybe you'd like to have some snacks and food that would be available. If you're going to be in a shelter, in the Red Cross, mostly in this country, does the sheltering for in disasters. You might want games or something to read. Take your some utensils, other kinds of things. But also very important is to have a communication plan in place for your family, so that, hey, so Dad is at work, the house. We have to leave the house. We have to evacuate for whatever reason. Where do we meet each other? So that we need to, and you share it with your aunt that lives out of state too, so that she knows how to contact you. Carry an extra battery charged so that you could use it for your cell phone. But chances are we're not going to have a cell phone anyway in some of these situations.
Yeah.
If the towers were to go down in an we'd be without communication.
Everybody be walking around like this,
Right.
trying to find reception.
Yeah.
It'd be like South Park, like, before the internet, how did we find out the news in the world? And they finally figure out it was TV.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah.
but the text messages have been able to get through in people buried, for example, and rescued because they were able to text.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
You brought up communication. It made me think of something. When I was going through interviews for medical school, one of the questions I got asked was, you're a doctor, you're working in a hospital, there is a pandemic, and this was before COVID.
Right.
There's a pandemic going around, and the government wants you not to tell anybody. You're going to work the full weekend. You cannot tell your wife and kids about
Yeah.
it. Do you reach out to your wife and kids and tell them to get out of the county, go to the mountains or whatever, someplace away from it? Or do you do your job and just listen to what they say? And what would you choose?
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you exactly, because I know how I am. I'd say something.
Yeah.
I absolutely would. I
Yeah.
would not be able to keep that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would not.
How about you?
Boy, that's and that's what I'm supposed to be teaching is ethics.
Yeah.
But I think I've never been in a position where I couldn't reach out to my family, and I think in that situation, if I were in that situation, maybe we should have talked about this before, and I could simply say cold blue, or
Yeah.
No, yeah.
you know.
So you're
And,
not officially telling them.
then
yeah.
you're not officially telling them.
Yep.
And I served as a Fulbright scholar in Kosovo for a 6-month period, and had an orientation at the embassy there, and they gave me words that I was to say that if I were kidnapped or in danger, just a code. And
Yeah.
so, hey, that's not a bad idea for us as families to
Yeah.
develop. But are we going to be in that situation? Most of us think, oh, I'll never have that situation, so we never prepare for it.
For it, yeah.
But maybe we will.
Well, so it's nice to talk about this because obviously where I work we have ERP plans. I mean,
Yeah.
and I've been part of writing ERP
Right.
plans and things like that. So I know the ins and outs of what I should be doing,
Yep.
and I know how to do them at work. I don't take that at home.
Yeah.
I'm-
And we
Never.
should. And we
And
should
we
take
should,
it at
yeah.
home. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just something to think about, and same with not even just emergency response, but just safety in general.
Yeah.
There are things that I now would never do at work, but if I'm at home,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's like, well, I'll be fine. You know what I mean? It's just funny how like when you're forced to do those types of things, it's really not that hard. But the minute that you're not being forced to do it,
Yeah.
it's really easy just to, you know what I mean? Toss it
Yeah.
aside.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is. I don't have a fire extinguisher.
Right. Well, and I
know.
have one that doesn't work anymore.
More.
It's so old.
Yeah. You could just pull the SpongeBob and throw it at it and try to run away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and so, before we go, can we get a selfie?
Well, sure,
No,
we can get
got
a
it.
selfie.
Yeah.
Oh, we got it right
Yeah,
there.
it's all
Yeah.
recorded.
We do have
Oh.
it. I did wonder. So, okay. I do have
Okay.
a couple questions. I don't want to keep you. I know you're very
Okay.
busy.
We got time.
And so one thing that we were talking about, so emergency, so like a 72-hour kit, and whenever you had talked to Nora and some of these other women from Kosovo in that village, did you get the feeling that they'd ever even been educated on such a thing in that country?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that they had even anticipated or thought that this kind of a thing had happened. They'd lived, they didn't necessarily like their Serbian neighbors, but they were neighbors.
Right.
And so to have their neighbors turn against them,
Mm-hmm.
that was I'm sure a complete surprise.
Surprise, yes. So a sense of comfort, which we're all familiar with, but at the same time, like, I guess where I'm going is trying to compare a little bit of our country to other countries out there. The knowledge and information is out there here in this country. I don't know that it is everywhere else in the world for people. I don't know if that's by design necessarily. I'm not necessarily saying governments are trying not to, but there are governments out there that don't tell their people how to keep themselves safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and they
or
don't,
give them the resources to.
Under the old Yugoslavia, they used to teach these kinds of things in school. They don't anymore, and so their level of preparedness is a lot less than what ours is, and we don't have survey information or data to show that in that country, but we do in our own country, and maybe 50% of our people in the United States feel that they are prepared, and maybe they're not prepared.
Right.
So.
But it normally takes like a natural, not a natural, but any disaster or very high tension, especially if we're talking about like humans and like war, because were you ever trained how to get underneath your desk in case they drop a bomb?
No.
And that was a very common thing.
Yeah.
Well, I was raised in the 1950s, and so I was.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but
the
tensions were high. Like, it's understandable, but
now,
Yeah.
they don't do it.
now in Utah, I live in an earthquake zone, and annually they have an earthquake drill for the whole state, and we are told to get under our desks. So.
Right, yeah, which I don't know, that may,
Well,
Or
maybe or
stuff
may not.
falling on you.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
But if it collapses out from under you, it's obviously not going to do much.
No, it's not.
No, I know that it is funny to think about
Right.
just how that's changed so much. It's 52 minutes. Or do you have?
no, we're actually only at like 30 something.
Oh
I
yeah,
think.
you're right. Okay.
Oh, because of our interruptions, huh?
Yeah, and the time keeps playing on there.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So, one thing, this could take some time. So let's just see where it goes. If we have to cut it short, we have to cut it short.
Well, I have a 10 o'clock appointment.
Okay. So let's 15 minutes.
All right.
Let's not go down the rabbit. Okay. So, Kiefer, when did you say he was going to be back?
Yeah, are you going to be back in the
September?
fall? September?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you can make time, and I'll just
Okay.
prepare you for this. I do want to get in a little bit about the Ukraine war when you
All
come
right.
back.
Okay, and I might be better prepared.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I've spent a lot of time in Southeast Europe, which of course is the former Yugoslavia. I haven't spent time in Ukraine, but one of my colleagues, she was a OSCE, I think is the term, the observer in Ukraine before the war started, and the book that we have written is based upon our experience and knowledge of the area. And so she was in the Donbass and observing the conflict between Russian ethnic people and Ukrainian people.
Yep.
And so I'm working on revising that so that it includes the war story and we're talking in terms of why and maybe some solutions.
Yeah.
Of course, it's easy to sit in a chair and pontificate like this.
Yes.
And,
There is nothing better than armchair quarterbacking.
Right,
It
I
is
know.
everybody's favorite pastime. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. But okay, if we're going to sum up though, in some of this, if you don't mind, I just kind of want to sum up with a little bit of yourself. But you've written 2 books and numerous articles. Do you want to just briefly highlight a couple that you're particularly proud of, or let people know where to look at them?
I just talked to, and you can go on Amazon
Okay.
and find the book about the Donbass,
Okay.
about Ukraine. I started in the communication area. I thought I was going to be a journalist, and still I till I got my first paycheck.
Yeah.
And then, and so maybe I survived a couple of years in the media field and then started teaching. And teaching hasn't been much better in terms of the amount of money you make. You should become a welder and come to
Tokyo Tech.
Tokyo Tech and
Get certified before you even graduate high school.
Right, and make whatever $50 an hour. I'm not sure what they're making.
Pretty good if you're willing to travel. for
Right,
sure, yeah.
right, and if you're young, that's all right, I guess. You know, they just take your values with you.
Yeah, true. What was the name of your book?
It's heaven forgive me, I don't know. It's humanitarian and something. If we do PAC.
PAC.
I don't even know how to spell my co-author's last name. How's that? And that's what I was going to give you. But
I'll find it and then I'll
okay,
link it.
Sorry about that.
We can put an advertisement back in too or something.
Yeah.
Too. It's not so, I'll tell you about that later.
I think that when you talk about the accumulation of things that I've done, I think the thing I'm mostly proud of is the working with students and working with colleagues and cooperating and doing research together.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it over the last 14 years that I've been in Utah has been on the topic of emergency preparedness, but also I've done a lot of research in mass media impact on disaster policy, and so and I guess that's where I've been going. I don't know.
That would be interesting to get into.
Yeah. So whenever you come back, so it's July. You're coming back in September. So September, we're going to talk about the Ukraine war. But then when you come back in November, December,
right? Then we can talk about that. All right. Okay.
Well, the whole social media. I kind of have a whole thing. I won't get into it now about the Ukraine war and social media because it is one of the first wars where everything is being put on the internet.
Yeah.
Right.
Like it's not just like a news, somebody out there getting people shooting into a field or something. It's body cam. It's
right. Yeah. And you don't
you're digesting this war a lot differently than you have other wars.
Well, and if you're following it on social media, a lot of us just choose to blank it out, of course, and I think that's a problem that we have.
Yeah.
The Arab Spring, of course, was one of the first social media created events, and I think Google was partly complicit in this. This was the overthrow of dictatorships in the Middle East, Egypt, and Libya resulted all of it because of that. And so, social media has a power far beyond what we can imagine. Therefore, the reason that China, for example, restricts their use of social media.
That's not a bad thing.
Oh, if you're the Chinese communists.
Yeah.
Yeah. All back to are we moving forward with people's rights or are we moving backwards with people's rights? That juggle a little bit.
Well, and even in the United States.
Yeah.
I think one of the real questions is are we willing to give up some of our rights because of our fear of whatever it may be? And fear of terrorism, fear of pandemics, whatever. You know?
Well, to me, when you're talking about whether you want to give or take away rights, we tend to. So there's always abusers of those rights, And we tend to, again, like we talked about earlier, we like to knee-jerk react to the abusers of those rights.
Yes.
And I understand that logic. But the problem is, to me, and I could be wrong, I don't know, but in my opinion, I feel like there are way less abusers of these rights program systems than there are people using it properly. I feel like we get told, and the abuse of these things get highlighted way more than what's being done good with those programs, rights, and etc.
I think you're optimistic.
Yeah, well, maybe I might be.
An optimist here at the end of the table.
Yeah, that might absolutely be true, but I think the biggest question is like, yeah, we want to do something about the abuse of those, but taking it away from everybody that is using it appropriately is a knee-jerk reaction to the abusers. I don't think is the right answer.
Right.
I guess that's my
and it's often the people who are in control that are doing this, taking it away. It's my concern, and
yes,
and so this is one of the issues that. Where do we draw the line?
Yes.
I mean, are we willing to go to jail to protect this particular right, the freedom of speech, for example?
Right.
And some people have proved that they are.
Yes.
And more power to them. I'm not sure if I'm one of those.
Right. Well, to me too, the other problem that we have, and again, I think it's a people problem. It's a little bit of the way the way that we're wired. Individuals and even small groups at the end of the day are only comfortable with other people and other small groups or large groups having the rights that they're comfortable with having.
Yes, right. Yeah, I think that's
probably
true.
That's pretty tunnel vision, pretty tunnel thinking, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, they're my rights, but not your rights sometimes.
Right. Well, I don't abuse it, but you do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take it away from you without the understanding that you're taking it away from many other people that are just like you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's So I think we got caught up in that a lot. And so it's 9:55, guys.
Okay.
We'll probably call it good. I've actually got something at 10. I've got to get to 2 or pretty close to it. So, but Dr. John Fisher,
yes,
I appreciate it, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay.
In September.
In September.
Yep.
Yes.
We'll plan on it.
Not sure when this will come out. This might be actually after our next interview.
All right.
Just depends. I've been moving stuff around.
Right.
But yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yep. So
well, and I hope it's. I haven't caused too much of an edit problem that you can.
No, I don't think so. No, not too bad at all.
So that it's not a lot of work I'm creating for you.
Kiefer's a professional.
Oh, is he? Yes, he is. I've noticed that.
It's not so much the editing; it's all the controversial things you were saying.
Oh, right. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. John. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you.